New York has the most billionaires in the world. Luck is a function of being in the game, and you can't lose if you don't quit. What I've realized in studying successful brands, I think there's this, I'm just really honest with you, I don't believe in burnout.
Welcome to Boldly Human, the podcast where we uncover unconventional ways to make money and explore unique mindsets and cultural perspectives to help you create a life that's right for you. Today's guest is Clinton, better known for his fitness Instagram 11VNFit. After becoming extremely successful in his corporate life at companies like Deloitte, Vance, and Coach, where he reached senior director, Clinton felt the pull of entrepreneurship and recently launched a men's fitness clothing brand. If you've ever felt torn between stability and freedom, or between chasing success and actually enjoying it, this conversation is for you. Don't forget that every piece of support or advice means more than you can imagine. Thank you so much for being here from the start. Now let's get into the episode. Welcome to Boldly Human. We met at the gym and you're kind of talking about your experience graduating from USC, the corporate life, and kind of what you're working on now. But what brought you to Bali?
Yeah, Bali is an interesting place now that I've experienced it. America, I feel like, has a pretty polarizing view on Bali. There's one camp that says it's majestic, beautiful, and all the lush aspects of the island, and then another have a bit more of a conservative view towards like how you brush your teeth and being very conscientious of that. So for me, it was really more of a, give it a shot, see, and make my own opinion of it. I think Bali has been very interesting because it's kind of one island that I had a preconceived notion around, which is vacation, but really now being here, it's so interesting to see people on so many different walks of life. So yeah, it was a bit of a random venture, and I'm really glad that I have had some experience here because I actually consider it second home now.
Really? What makes it feel like a second home?
I love this question because for me, I think New York City is one of the greatest cities in the world. And I attribute that to the fact that it is a city where I feel a collective energy, a transient community that seeks community outward.
Okay.
And being from LA, where there's a bit of comfort in kind of your surroundings, I've always found that feeling of constant searching to be home. And New York is, from what I've experienced, really oriented around your career development. And I think Bali has a bit more of a diverse energy when it comes to seeking something greater and that same transient community, but through so many different walks of life, spiritual, financial, physical, love. I mean, there's just so many aspects of searching that is occurring here that I feel that home, I think we talked about this, is a feeling, not a place. And Bali has really created that sense of community in that way.
Yeah. And what do you think has been the most surprising part about Bali so far?
For me personally, it's how sub-communities can exist in so many diverse ways. So in the gym that we met at, there's its own community there. There is the community of people that are really passing by purely for vacation purposes. There's a community where there are people here for something greater, as we just talked about. Right. So I think that as small of an island as it is, it has such diversity when it comes to community. And the development here is racing to meet some of the demand. So I think that I have a lot of, optimism for where Bali currently exists. But I do think it is disrupting a bit of like normal day-to-day life for the locals.
Right.
At a pace that's like very uncomfortable. Even as I've come back and forth over the last few months, the environment changes so rapidly, whereas these are typically things that should take years to whether it's gentrify or what have you.
That's so true.
Yeah, it's just been interesting to see the speed of development trying to catch up to the demand. And I hope that there won't be a tipping point for which there is this perceived future demand that doesn't get met through whatever reason.
Right, because so many people now are building villas and they're not having the full funds to finish them. They're like having people come in and be like, we're selling you this villa that will be finished after you pay for it.
Yeah.
Which is such a crazy thing with how many people are doing it.
Totally. Yeah. Bubble 101, right? It's like you see opportunity and financial institutions, investors, people race to get there. But I mean, as we all know, with just anything in life, it can be so fleeting when it comes to the next popularized island through creators saying that, I don't know, some other island is the new hotspot
Yeah, the
for
new Bali kind of feeling.
exactly. And so that will then put a lot of these projects that have a longer tail in a bit of financial instability. So, for me, as someone who always tries to anticipate trends, I almost feel like Bali is a place where trends have already made its case, and now the demand is seeking to
Yeah.
satisfy versus, or sorry, the supply. Whereas in many cases, you want to kind of be able to anticipate, or from a brand standpoint, as I think about even how do you anticipate and create the trend, sans understand that something's on hot today and you race to kind of satisfy the demand. So just being very mindful of like, we have something great here and how do we preserve it, but not over invest into it, whether it's development or properties or whatever.
Yeah. Do you think that that can be something that you spot before, or do you think that would be more of an after realization?
Yeah, I mean, we might be, well, let's see where we take this. But,
Yeah.
I think that for fitness specifically as an industry, it's pretty competitive here. Every gym has a state of the art fitness studio,
Yep.
recovery center. And so the competition here is fierce. And so I just feel that being very thoughtful about what opportunities still exist here and just enjoying what we have here now. So I think if I bring it back to like why I'm here,
Right.
I'm enjoying Bali for what it is today and appreciating the longevity of that, whether it's for 20, 30 years to come or tomorrow it becomes just yesterday's news. So just being mindful of like, be in environments that serve you in the times and seasons of life that best serve you as well. And,
Yeah.
that's what makes, I think, life so amazing, that you can't necessarily always hold on to a certain feeling or a certain environment. You just have to embrace the current state. And right now, Bali is a fantastic place to be for my personal journey, and I hope that it preserves. But if not, then we just have to adapt and follow what makes sense for you.
And then how do you see Bali compared to the US? I know you kind of talked about it before a little bit, but like what are some of the things that you look at Bali versus the US and you can kind of see the side by side difference?
Yeah, the US is interesting. I think, let me preface by saying, I think the US is one of the most, if not the best place for any dreamer to accomplish whatever goal they have. And independent of your upbringing, your socioeconomic status, being Korean American, I feel that in Korea, as an example, there is a bit more of a defined path that is harder to digress from. And so I think the US celebrates really standing out from the crowd, even though there are systems in place like the school system and whatever to really moderate a traditional path. So I think I appreciate the entrepreneurial support that all the systems and the people that you can meet in such a melting pot of culture, which
Right.
is the US. Similarly, I think Bali has a melting pot of cultures that congregate here, and you can rub shoulders with someone who might be a future business partner, someone who might satisfy certain spiritual or personal relational needs. And so I think from the diversity of thought and backgrounds, there's similarity. But I mean, in the short of it, Bali is an island, and the US has the infrastructure to support, from my perspective, a bit more stability.
Right.
And so my honest feedback is that I think Bali is second to none when it comes to serving a phase of life. And for me personally, I think that the US has a bit more foundational structure that you can still get some of the benefits of what a transient community and a space where you can really connect with people that otherwise you don't have access to. But at the end
Right.
of the day, I think playing the long game ahead, I mean, the US is where I was raised, and I see that to be like home in the long term.
Yeah, so you were raised in LA
I
and
was.
your parents are immigrants from South Korea.
Correct.
Okay, and what was that like?
Yeah. Ooh, okay. So, you know, LA, I think, is one of the most interesting places in the world where status and value can perhaps precede individualism. So when you meet someone on the streets, my experience has been that before engagement, there is a bit of a kind of
What's your
vetting period. Yeah.
phone
And it's like, what car do you drive? Where did you graduate from? And what do you
Yeah.
do? And then it's like, oh, by the way, my name is. And, I think another philosophy I have is that I don't necessarily believe that anything is inherently good or evil, but more
Oh,
so from the
okay.
vantage point of like, that's the environment you're in, and you either adapt or you change.
Okay.
And so what that has taught me is to operate in a big city that I think prepares you for all varieties of life. And so I have a deep appreciation for learning how to adapt into an environment that otherwise may be a bit of a culture shock if authenticity is the root of what you're used to. And so, for me, growing up in LA has really defined me in a positive way. And, I continue to take that mindset forward of really being able to be adaptive and be the best version of myself. And yeah, being in a big city, you can get lost in competition, you can get lost in superficial things, but my appreciation for having traveled to so many different cultures, I think I'm able to compartmentalize. In LA, it may be that you have what exactly I just talked about in terms of some of the superficial aspects of the city, but you have the converse of that, which is an international hub of talent
Right.
and just so many
Ambitious people.
ambitious and talented people. So it's just helped broaden my aperture for the world, and then to be able to really take a step back and appreciate things for what they are versus assume that the world is this singular way of operating.
Right. I think it always surprises me too, like having a reverse culture shock, going back to the US after a while and hearing, oh, like this is what we value here versus wherever I've been in the world because it is so different. Like you're in Bali and people here value, I would say, family a
Hmm.
lot more. They value community a lot more. And they're like, we have a ceremony, we're taking off for a couple weeks. Like they really value their tradition
Hmm.
versus like in the US, you're like, you need a day off for what?
It's like, what? You sleep when you
What?
die? What? Yeah.
It's that feeling that's so different. But I do appreciate both because obviously, like you're saying, the US, there's ambitious, really people who are so involved in their talent that it becomes them.
Mm,
And here I do think there's a little bit more maybe balance, which
totally.
is another way to appreciate that too.
Absolutely.
So also talk a little bit more about your career experience. What have you
Yeah.
started in to now?
Yeah. I think what's interesting is I have become very self aware that, especially through the rise of social media, that we have aspects of ourselves that doesn't always have to be consistent. So,
Right.
for the broadest and longest time, I have defined myself as someone who is defined by their work. And so that meant resiliency in studies and aspiring to go to the most prestigious institutions that I could, associate myself to the most prestigious brands and companies. And so that has defined the larger part of my life. And I have tremendous appreciation for that because, I think it has taught me what my superpower is, which is hard work
Mm-hmm.
and being able to control the things that you can control and focus on those variables rather than playing the victim or whatever that might look like. So,
Right.
for me, it was always about how do I make sure that my rigor in my work ethic will always be my strongest differentiator. And so that has served me really well to date. And, I think what's interesting about success is the ability to enable an abundant mindset, which then allows you to think beyond survival. And
Right.
so, having achieved what, to my own narrative, which is success, I was able to then just take a step back and say, like, if tomorrow was my last day, would the life that I'm living satisfy what I believe to be, my purpose, or however you want to define that? And I came to a realization at one point that, like, no matter what in the corporate world, there are always masters to serve. And
Yeah.
it just became very evident to me that, like, time is something that is not fully within your control. And this is where I stand today in terms of pursuing avenues that enable me to work anywhere, to not put a clear line between work and play, and just live a life that serves me. And that's not always the luxury of life, and people value different things. I think having the you know ability to say I drive a nice car, live in a nice house, but then have to serve 10 different masters in one different area of your life, I think that's not necessarily a bad life. So I think it's just very important to define for yourself what happiness means. Because
Right.
for me, it might be to work really hard and, you know, not sleep for the sake of hopefully being able to work from anywhere, versus stability might be a higher value driver for somebody. And that means work a 9 to 5 and really be the best in kind of the game that you're currently playing, and live happily within that reality. So what I want to just be very transparent on is that, like, my journey is really around the abundance of time at the cost of major failures and, potentially having to go back into a reality where I have to support myself financially through institution. But I think while we're still young
Right.
and have the drive and energy, and not just the, hesitation from the sake of needing to support family or what have you, the time is now, and, no regrets. So,
Yeah. So you also have traveled a lot for work, and you've been in was it consulting, if I
yeah,
remember correctly?
yeah.
Okay. What was that experience like?
Yeah, I think consulting is a very interesting industry. It has changed over the years given, this adoption of remote work, but essentially consulting is sold as this opportunity to advise high-level executives and be able to travel around the world. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
those are the two selling points, with a high wage, but your time isn't your own and you work really hard.
Right.
And so going back to, like, in certain seasons of life that serves you, and I think that's a fantastic accelerant to your career trajectory, and I'm very grateful for that. It has also come with its potential downsides, if that's the perspective you want to put, which is it lacks stability and consistency and community. And so for me, it's then opened my mind to be able to say home is a feeling, not a place. And I've carried that through my entire life of just going to environments that serve me best. And I think travel, the way I define it now is, and we talked about this,
Mm-hmm.
but it's, for me, it's less about, okay, I want to go somewhere and experience completely new cultures and systems and routines, but more so saying, okay, I've traveled to the extent that my interest has taken me to certain places, and now I'm repeating the same routines in areas that best serve me for different seasons of life, whether that's weather implications, whether that's human connection implications, or areas that I know that I have the opportunity to really be inspired by the career trajectory of those around me. So I found my hot spots, if you will, now for different seasons of life. And, it's
Oh, what are
been,
your hotspots?
well, Bali is one for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, Bali for me is like the most advantageous spiritually and physically. I think there is a very big focus here on just your overall health and longevity. So I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. New York for a career. I think I walk the streets of New York and I'm just inspired by the energy and the people around me.
Okay.
I think LA for family. Just that's where I'm most familiar with. And so
Right.
I typically like to spread my time across those three areas to really, find balance for me. And yeah, I feel like I'm at home given the seasons of life that, I'm currently in. And I don't necessarily need to be sitting in LA to feel that way long term. So yeah, it's just self-awareness of what my priorities are and then aligning the location to best serve that.
I like that a lot because that is so true. Like every location you go to is so different.
Yeah.
Every place, every country, whatever it is for you that you kind of draw to. I have to agree. I feel like I am also the kind of person who likes different places for different seasons. And I think Bali has been one of those places where you can kind of have an international hub of people who are entrepreneurial and are like either chasing a dream that they have or they've already built it and they have one of the places as Bali for their hotspots, as you could say. But what in particular do you feel about New York that makes it such a career spot compared to here? Because I feel like both kind of have career opportunities, but maybe one's better for you.
Yeah, bravo. I actually really think that's such a deep and insightful question. And I try to self-proclaim, be very intentional when I say that's a great question because I feel like it's generally what people say to create time. But, I think I read something the other day where New York has the most billionaires in the world. And there's something about the proximity to, if we dare call it excellence in
Right.
like career, that transcends beyond, what it takes to get there. And so everything from the inspiration of the energy around you, the feeling that it is attainable because it is within your proximity.
Right.
I think the power of physical beyond digital, I think there's something to be said there. And so I wouldn't necessarily say New York is better. I think that it's a higher concentration of why people are there. I
Okay.
think for kind of going back to what I was saying is that I think people can be in Bali for spiritual reasons and love. And I'll flip the script on like the, I guess, potential negatives. New York City being one of my favorite cities in the world is that it can be also perceived as very lonely and the worst city in the world for dating potentially. And so I know a lot of these like,
Really?
yeah, I mean, here's my perspective, but look, I'm not saying any of this is gospel, but I think you're in New York for a purpose, which is to accomplish your dreams. I'm generalizing
Right.
here.
Yeah, that's
And for me, it's like if you pay $5,000 a month for a small little studio that has a decent view, whatever you want to call it, I think the temporariness of that environment, to me, the trade-off has to be astronomical. And I think the way we've defined happiness is around financial success. So
Right.
I think people are like very open and willing to put up with that for a season in life. Whereas Bali is a lot more affordable and, to be very frank, like livable in the sense of just long term. And so, given the livability and the influence of the nature that is around here, I think just inherently it becomes more of a hub for a balanced seeking of betterment versus New York being arguably very focused on career development.
Okay, so this is like more overall health here.
Yeah.
I do see that a lot, especially with the resort gyms. The way that they have a pool, they have a sauna, they have a massage parlor, they have like literally everything, and you never have to leave.
Yeah. And there's one of those that I can think of in New York, and it is the most like, it's like when the cavemen found soap of how well regarded it is. And here it's like, oh, another gym.
I love that.
I just came up with that, so I'm
That's
glad.
a good one. I really like that.
Yeah, we'll use it hopefully for many analogies to come. But
Okay,
yeah.
what's it called?
Bathhouse Flatiron. Flatiron Bathhouse. Yeah, it's like
Flatiron
all the
Bathhouse.
rage. And
Okay.
like I think perspective is a interesting thing because I went there myself and hey, great establishment, but
Yeah.
the reaction I have from the experiences of what Bali has offered was not so life changing, but having gone there with a few friends now, I mean, it is regarded as like the holy sanctuary of New York City within my
Okay.
circle. So yeah, it's just interesting because these types of facilities are so scarce, and I think it makes it more valued. I mean, think about just supply and demand when it comes to anything in life. And so I think you just have more of a livable environment, a more affordable environment, and people that are really here for more balanced self-discovery than, at least from my perspective with New York, even from my own personal journey and why I lived there for a few years, was like, look, this is a career opportunity of a lifetime and I want to really maximize that. And I wasn't really there for wellness or seeking better balance. It was,
Right.
wow, I've been offered a career opportunity that can really set me up for success. And so that was my sole focus. It really wasn't to kind of maximize the more balanced experience that I feel a bit more prone to here.
That does feel like what New York feels like. People are like, I'm shutting the door on you. I got a meeting.
Yeah.
They are very like so career driven that it really is nothing
Yeah.
else. At least that's what it felt like when I was there.
Yeah, just think about the pace of people walking, right? Time is
You're
money
right.
there, and like, yeah, you're just so laser focused on that. But look, I just want to be very clear. I think it's one of the best cities in the world. I
Yeah,
love New
it
York.
is a great city,
Yeah,
and it was one of my favorites because I grew up in New Jersey,
that's
and
right.
yeah, and we would go in, or I would go into the city, and sometimes with my family to see Broadway shows. Like, I loved it.
Yeah.
It's just with anything, when you see something enough, you start to see, oh, there's some downsides here.
Yeah, yeah. The trash on the streets. I'm never gonna get used to that, but it's still one of those places in the world that it's just something special.
Yeah. And then going back a little bit to what you're doing now. So, when did you learn that you love fitness?
Yeah. Oof. Okay. So I think there's a few ways I want to tackle this.
Okay.
So I use fitness to support the following. How you show up for one thing is how you show up for everything. And fitness is one area where you cannot shortcut your way to success. Now, there are some outliers and drugs that can enhance performance, but by and large, as we speak in general terms,
Mm-hmm.
you have to show up every day, and there are no overnight successes. Of course, there are genetic implications that we, are more advantaged, but by and large, it requires a commitment to self betterment on a daily basis without instant gratification, for which has really become what I feel like, the patience that we all have has really been whittled down. And I think fitness has always served as a constant to say, by being able to be the best physical version of myself, I then have the momentum to tackle anything thereafter. And it's a commitment to myself. It is a commitment to the person that I aspire to want to be in the future. And also has become now my platform for community and inspiring others that may not be as genetically gifted, but am a representation that if you are consistent and want something enough and can maintain, then that's, you can then take that mentality and be able to accomplish whatever else it is with that same commitment and discipline. So,
Right. But what age were you like, wow, I love this world?
I want to actually give a very perhaps not typical
Okay.
vantage point here. At the end of the day, I think there's a bit of vanity when it comes to fitness.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be very open and honest. Like, there was a time in my life where I was at a party in high school and we were all like hanging out by the pool, and I just felt severely overweight. And in that moment, just something clicked where I wanted to never feel that type of way again.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think one of the interesting narratives, and perhaps a bit polarizing, but I'm going to say it anyway, is that however you want to define greatness, there's a story for which one was forced to be great. And so I think Tom Brady is the best quarterback in the world. I mean, I followed him. I'm a huge fan of Tom Brady. Do you know Tom Brady?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah, sports.
yeah, yeah. Woo! Peel the onion, and he's
I'll be honest.
yeah. Woo! Sports.
Or sports.
Just smile and nod. Smile and nod.
No, what I do.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, we all know Tom Brady
Yeah.
for sure.
But like, he celebrated on the field as a football, god.
Right.
But when the lights turn off, he's divorced, has kids with multiple partners. And not to say no shade on Tom Brady in any respect, but I think there's a few things. Chip on shoulder. I mean, 199th draft in the NFL, was benched multiple times. And so when I say behind every great individual, there was a narrative that forced the individual to do so, I think in order to be so great at your craft, it requires a relentless discipline that is celebrated, but usually comes at a cost.
Right.
And so for me, it's always like, how do you find your why so that whatever it is that you're committing to is that relentless pursuit? And as long as that passion is true to you and you're not chasing some vanity metric, I think that's really where greatness can come, because showing up every day, going to the gym, eating right, doing your routine, I mean, that requires a level of commitment and discipline that transcends the normal, discipline and rigor. I mean, you're fighting your genetic disposition around what your sedentary weight is to how you can move and operate. So my point here with this is that like fitness to me is a commitment to myself, but it's also a projection of saying, this is how I've defined myself to be great. And this is the path that I've chosen, at the cost and being very self-aware that like certain things will have to be sacrificed along the way. But I think just being very self-aware of saying like, this is the journey and life that serves me best. And if you can apply that to whatever discipline, practice, business, love, the greatest relationships are the ones that people are working towards versus two soulmates that find each other, which is my belief again. So, I think it's just like with fitness, with anything else, it's like finding something that's worth committing to and being relentless at it, but then also having the self-awareness to know there are seasons of life where, maybe it is okay to let loose a little bit because there's commitments beyond what fitness, can offer me, which is maybe I need to spend more time with my family. Maybe I need to eat a little bit more to share community with people that otherwise I wouldn't be with. And if I was alone, I would be okay to not be in environments where I would digress from my normal fitness routine. So I've shared a lot, but I think, for me, fitness is a commitment to excellence. And when it comes to excellence in general, I think it just requires a relentless self-awareness to say, this means enough to me where I'm willing to commit in a way that's perhaps not as normal, but then also being able to take a step back and saying, okay, this serves me for this phase of life. And now I need to really be open-minded towards how do I reallocate that energy to other things that may have more of a long-term happiness factor.
What makes discipline so important to you?
Yeah, discipline versus motivation is one of the core
Right.
themes that I really talk about. And I define motivation as follows. It's fleeting.
Okay.
And, motivation is, something that I think, or let me take it a different way. I think discipline creates efficiencies in life that you then are able to apply your energy into other aspects of life. And I see willpower as a muscle. And so when it comes to just like discipline in the realm of fitness, I actually don't believe I have more willpower than anyone else. I've just created efficiencies in life where I don't have to exert willpower. So it goes back to like what we were saying of like choices, right? Every time I have to decide to eat healthy or decide to go to the gym, there's a bit of willpower fatigue that happens. And so I've created a system in my life where I just execute on the fitness, and then it opens my brain's capacity to be able to explore new things and apply energy in other aspects of life. So with whatever it is that you're doing on a day-to-day basis, I think there's so much utility in systematizing the things that are like true to you. Agreed. So that it leaves time and energy and willpower for, relationships or fun or whatever else that serves you in your day-to-day.
So choices is kind of one of the, I would say, main pillars then of discipline. It's like eliminating the ability to have decision fatigue when you're going throughout your day, so you can make sure that you're hitting everything that you value
Totally.
as a person. What are
Totally.
some of the ways that you have eliminated choice to create habits?
I laugh a little, and this is more of my own personal insider joke, but I've been dubbed as carbless Clinton many
Okay.
times. And so, I don't eat simple carbs. And I clarify that because if I just said I don't eat carbs, there would probably be some nutritionists out there that are going to blast me for this because I eat vegetables.
Okay.
But essentially, you know, or one statement I want to make before going into this is that I think that like willpower is very unique to the individual. So if we talk about food consumption, my ability to exercise good choices is to identify as someone who does not consume in the slightest the things that I know don't serve me. So carbs, as an simple carbs, as an example. Whereas another person might be able to indulge in perhaps not so healthy foods, but in limited quantities. And so I think it goes back to self-awareness, know
Mm-hmm.
thyself. And I think the fitness industry is like so laden with misinformation. I mean, you
It
have
is.
genetically gifted individuals saying it's all about calories in, calories out. And yes, of course, that is a variable, but 500 calories of a donut is not the same as, you know, 10 bowls of salad that have
Right.
the same amount of.
Quantity over quality.
Exactly. So I think the most practical advice I can give is that everything in life it's a general principle that should be applied to oneself, and then to iterate on that I think is the best way to think about the best diet, the best
Right.
exercise, because the last variable that I think that people perhaps don't take into account is that if it's not fun, you likely will at some point stop doing it. And, as disciplined as I feel like I am in life, there are aspects of the novelty of fun that enable me to be disciplined. So I genuinely enjoy eating my 10 pounds of salad at lunch. And it's not discipline for me because it's fun. And
Right.
same with working out. Like if I ever feel fatigue around the exercises, I just change the form of exercise.
Yeah.
And so just being very self-aware to say like, look, movement and nutrition are the cornerstones of fitness success. What does that mean for you, Cassie? Because that's not the
Right.
same for me. You might enjoy
Right.
Pilates. I might think of Pilates and think, wow, I am mortified at this concept of holding a position for X amount of time. So,
You don't like Pilates?
oh, I love Pilates, by the way. Let me just be clear, but that's the first thing that came to mind. But I think my point is really
Right.
around like, make it fun.
Exactly.
Yeah. And if you can't see yourself doing it forever, like I personally don't think it's worth starting at all.
Agreed. I just read a book. What is it? The Productivity by Ali Abdaal. What is it?
Sure, let's go with that.
It's a productivity book that he created, and it was so good. I was like, I'm sad that it's over because the book was so helpful in the ways that you actually can implement these like tactics to make you more productive. Like, I think about how much motivation comes into what I do on a daily basis, and discipline is so much easier when you can just increase motivation. And it's like having that balance of, okay, like how much can I increase my motivation so that even if I don't feel like it, it's still not an option that I don't want to do at all.
Interesting. So I'm actually curious for you, like discipline, motivation, like how do you see like do you have a very strong stance on like what you rely on to become whatever version, the best version of yourself?
It's so funny because when you were saying that earlier, I was thinking, do I value motivation or discipline more? And I don't really think about discipline because I think I obviously have ways to be disciplined. Time frames I set for this podcast, for instance.
Yeah.
I set a schedule. So there was like a discipline in that. But I think my focus recently has been, how do I make things fun? Because I came to a point where I was so disciplined that I was intensely miserable. So I thought, okay, this is not how I want to live my life.
Totally.
2 hours in the gym every day, like going home and measuring food, like it can drive a person like me mad. So I try to make it so I go to classes I like. I wake up in the morning and I have a book next to me. So there's no, again, limiting choice.
Right.
But I do really value motivation in this part of my life and how to make myself more excited for it.
Totally. I fully agree. I see it all as in support of like discipline, fun, motivation. There are ways to create an ecosystem where sometimes you have to rely on motivation. Sometimes it's better that you have a system and process, and other times it's boring. So make it more
It's the
fun.
balance of it, for sure. How do you balance everything? I mean, you do so much on a daily basis. You have the work going on, the relationships that you're trying to probably build or manage here, and then also going to the gym and just making sure you have it all covered.
I actually really thought about this concept of balance, and I think about it a lot. I'm probably the minority in this, but I like to go 110% for bouts of time and then completely switch priorities. And so I think I actually reflected on this pretty deeply. It's conditioning from my parents. I think like coming from an immigrant family, there's a big emphasis on hard work. And I've learned that, for example, the 30 days I've spent here in Bali, I've done the same routine, the same workout, the same meals. And people ask me like, oh, do you not need a break? But, in a few days, I'm going to be in a different country applying a whole different routine. So what people may perceive as burnout, I perceive as balance in the sense that I will live in a different reality in a few days' time. And so that keeps me energized versus living for the weekend or living for the evenings to decompress. It's just, and that's also partially why I went into a more entrepreneurial journey, which is like, I want to be in full control of the areas of life where I spend time. And yeah, balance to me is defined through, extreme bouts of commitment, and then balance through a significant change in environment and routine.
I would say the same, because I don't know if I believe in balance right now, but maybe that's the season of life that I'm in.
Yeah.
That could change in a couple of years, but I think that you have priorities, and when you choose one thing over another and you're more in one area of your life, at least for me, I have more seasons.
Totally. Yeah. Your life is unique to you, and I feel like there's not one script or like normal definition of any of this stuff.
Agreed. I think there's what works for each person. So if I were to be in a balanced state all the time, I might not feel as excited about the things that I'm doing, because I'm a little bit more of like laser focus. This is what I want, and this is what's going to take up the majority of my time. Anything else can kind of wait. But
love that.
I like that yours is having that kind of time to switch. I haven't heard that before.
So we're both crazy. You know what you're saying? It's like, oh, there's someone else that thinks like this.
we are both crazy.
That's what makes Bali special, right? You just connect with all perspectives of life. So.
And you were saying that some people might see that as burnout. So do you ever experience burnout?
I'm just really honest with you. I don't believe in burnout, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oof.
Oh, you're even crazier.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. You're like, wait, I thought there was a ceiling to this. Because when I think about energy, I think it's, let me take a very realistic approach today. So yesterday was one of the most physically demanding days I've had in a while. And this morning, every ounce in my body wanted to not work out, but I was able to somehow find the energy to do so. And so I think there's an element of like how resilient we can be if it's important to us.
Right.
And that's where the whole like motivation factor comes in, because in general, wow, I'm going to be really transparent. Okay. So I feel like because fitness has become such a big part of my life, I don't have to exert as much willpower to get up and go to a workout. I think
Right.
most of it is showing up, and then the
The habit is
habits.
there.
Exactly. Whereas today I saw someone and I thought to myself, wow, this person perhaps is new to fitness,
Okay.
and the amount of mental fatigue and physical fatigue this person is going through is perhaps like the constant that they're living through. And so in this moment, yes, I am handicapped from the perspective that I'm so exhausted, but I then oriented like the comparison of saying, wait, maybe this is how this person feels every day. So if this is how
Right.
this person feels every day, I should be able to muster the willpower, the motivation, the fun to make this something that I can execute in the same quality, even in the circumstances that I was in. So it goes back to just like, I think we are so resilient more than we can fathom. And our minds are the only thing that is holding us back when it comes to achieving a certain goal. And I think this is where manifestation comes from and all these things. And so if you can learn how to control this, burnout, fatigue, sure, they exist in the, I'm not that crazy where I don't
Right.
believe in these concepts, but I think there's a way to overcome them in a way
Okay.
that is perhaps not as intuitive from a daily just, going through the motions standpoint.
So then what do you tell yourself when you're like, oh, I don't feel like going?
I think now I think the themes are consistent here. It's like I think in order to achieve anything great, from my perspective, you have to re-identify as you have to reincarnate yourself as a healthy person. So,
Okay.
for example, like I think one of the most common things I hear, and I actually believe myself, is I'm not a runner. And a runner, I think, for whatever reason, in my communities, is like a marathon runner who can run like a 5 mile pace. And it has, for me, like I consider myself to be a runner. I'm slow. I am not that athletic. My VO2 max, funny story, when I was in college, we did a VO2 max test. So you blow into something, and I was blowing into it. And then the instructor was like, hey, you should start blowing into it now. And I'm like, I am blowing into it. So as I think about where I start from, I'm glad you enjoyed that story.
That's so rude.
But it's the reality of it. And, so from that story, one would consider, hey, you're not an athlete, you're not a runner, you don't have the capacity to. And so for me, it's like you create your own narrative for yourself based on the identity that you hold for yourself.
Right.
So going back to just like I am just someone who works out. It's not a negotiation period. Like
Right.
if that means don't sleep, if that means, I'm, going to miss something that is less important because I've identified as myself as someone who will do this no matter what, it is what it is. And to me, it's not about whether you have time or not. It's about how big of a priority is it. And that has a big connection to how you identify as an individual, whether it's, you are a runner, you are a healthy person, you are an entrepreneur. These identities have habits that enable the best version of oneself in those definitions of who you define yourself to be.
Okay, so it comes down a lot to identity, as in I am the kind of person who's gonna get up right now and work out. Like I am the kind of person who goes to the gym even when I'm tired.
No matter what. And
Okay.
it's not a negotiation. It's a belief system that, sure, there are instances where it's not always easy, but at the end of the day, it is who you are. And I think a lot of the things that I am a mother. And if I'm a mother, then I have a commitment to raising my child in the best way that I see fit. I am a fitness enthusiast, which means that in any given day, I have certain protocols that enable me to live by that identity. So I think it's just being very self-aware to say, like, who am I? What value systems do I have? And from there, those are the actions that you need to repeat on an everyday basis to enable yourself to truly be that individual.
So what happens if you don't? And if you don't go to the gym, you don't do the thing you told yourself to do, how do you trust yourself?
I love this question because I have changed my perspective on this pretty drastically over the last few years. You know, I used to, by typical standards, have an unhealthy relationship with my obsession with fitness and my physical body image. But now I've become a lot more at peace with playing a longer game. So, for example, if I don't work out today, I will take the mindset of I will either work out 2 times harder because I've now reserved energy for the following day, or I will moderate my eating if my goal is a certain physical stature. So
Okay.
I find ways to compensate instead of rely on a singular activity or a singular meal to dictate my identity. So
Right.
it's just like taking this current circumstance and adapting it into a longer play. And at the end of the day, just having a lot of appreciation for you as an individual and saying, like, you know what, maybe today was just not the day for me to do X, Y, Z. And I think that's really where confidence and self love comes into play, where, being very conscientious to say, like, there are days we're all human, but it doesn't discredit the commitment to excellence, but it also won't be all consuming and obsessive when it comes to really, come on, at the end of the day, it's just a workout. It's one meal. And if you
Right.
can use that as motivation to come back stronger the next day, I think that's where the sentiment of like taking one step back to take 2 steps forward to me really comes into play.
Right. Because I think that's something I struggle with. Because if I say to myself, I am someone who gets up and works, really hard, we'll just put a very general statement. Then the next time that I get up and I don't do that, I'm like, well, look, you didn't do that. Are you really that person? Like those
Mm.
thoughts come to my head. You don't have that kind of feeling of self-doubt when you don't
Hmm.
commit?
I think it's really interesting you say that because my answer might change depending on the discipline for which we're talking about here.
Oh,
So
okay.
I've oriented all throughout fitness. And so I think I just have so much confidence in that identity that it's unwavering. But
Okay.
here's one thing I will say when it comes to business, ironically, I think there's a big sentiment around imposter syndrome. And look, I have been in so many different rooms of different net worths and experience that, you know, if you're not feeling as like the feeling of imposter syndrome, I think should be extremely welcomed. I think it's actually a good kind of stress because it means you're in the right room and you're growing.
Okay.
And so maybe if you take that lens to that of saying like, as long as it's not like a sign of I just didn't feel like it versus other priorities had to come up in the context of like being balanced. I think there's that aspect of saying like, did you not do that activity because you just didn't feel like it and scrolled TikTok? Or was there a priority that, you know, in the grand scheme of things may best serve you when it comes to maybe you spent time with a loved one or, someone needed you that
Mm-hmm.
allowed for you to really grow in other ways. But absent of
True.
that, I think, being very just forgiving and understand that this is a long game. One meal ain't going to kill you. One podcast that you ended up not doing
Right.
isn't going to make or break your career. As long as you didn't cancel this one, we're good. But yeah, I think it's just play the long game. Have a
Okay.
long-term vision. Be kind to yourself and be confident to know that even at times where we feel imposters in whatever craft that it is, I am so confident in this sentiment that nobody knows what they're doing. We're just all figuring it out together. Of course, some people may see certain situations on a more frequent basis, and that comes off as confidence and experience. But the
Right.
world is ever changing. The world is so quick to adapt into new verticals. I mean, digital marketing, my ability to teach digital marketing is a construct of how rapidly the world is changing. So, experience, like really be mindful that we have to adapt or we will eventually like fall out of place, whether it's your career, whether it's fitness, whether like it's life is a constant game of evolution, I feel, and growing is something that I is a core value of mine, no matter how big or small, right? Growing might just be like, hey, I worked out 1% harder today versus yesterday. So define that growth path for yourself and continue
Right.
to build on that.
Set realistic expectations along with like not getting caught up in the negative, I think is so important.
Totally.
Because I mean, shoot high, obviously. Like have your dreams be something that you're like, "Oh, can I achieve that?" But the daily expectations, I think, is what is really important. Like the 3-month goal, not the 1 year goal.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when you have those goals that are a year out, and if you don't make those, you're like, oh my gosh, I failed. But when you have more recent realistic goals, at least that's my experience, it makes it so much easier
Totally.
to really live up to your own expectations.
Absolutely. One just reaction to that is I think one of the perspectives of why entrepreneurship is so hard is that you lack the systems of reinforcement bias. So when you
Okay.
set micro goals, I think you have this awareness that you're down the right path. And
Right.
so complementing what you're saying is that if you have these bite-sized goals and you're accomplishing them along the way, like it's not Christopher Columbus saying, hey, I want to discover a whole new, you know, piece of land. It's more like, hey, I want to make sure we're setting sail in the right way today, tomorrow, the next day, and then you complete those processes, and eventually the outcome will come as a result of the consistent actions that you're doing on a daily basis.
Right. Do you think that that has allowed you to scale up in your corporate career, like as fast as you have?
You know, with business, what I quickly came to realize is that there's a ceiling when it comes to being the smartest person in the room. And as with anything in life, I think relationships play such a critical role. And then when you complement that with hard work ethic, passion, high energy, and a commitment to excellence, I think that is appreciated so much in the workforce that, look, if I'm going to be really candid, I think consultants are seen as high value labor
Mm-hmm.
because they're quick to respond, they're intuitive. And not to say that just because you're a consultant, you have those qualities, but I think the environment really leans itself towards those qualities. And so I can remember I'm on vacation on a weekend in Vegas with friends, and I'm in the bathroom of the venue we're at, like taking client calls, taking notes,
Oh
and
my
being
gosh.
available. Yeah, but it fosters a sense of like commitment and excellence that will transcend way beyond a good idea,
Right.
because ideas are so plentiful and abundant, but it's the person who can take an idea, commit to it, and execute and be reliable on a consistent basis creates this feeling of community and support in wanting to help that individual rise in hierarchy or status, whatever you want to call it, in corporate America. So I think the value systems of having come from immigrant parents and working really hard has served me well. But I also think that, I'm also now self-aware that what I want in life is really abundance, and abundance of
Right.
time, and abundance of energy. And yeah, there are many cases where the standard structures and institutions that exist today enable that. And there are some cases where entrepreneurship best serves you. So it goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's like, I don't think there's a right or wrong in anything: fitness, business, life, relationships. It's like, have the self-awareness to understand like what serves you best
Right.
and play into that. Not, there is no best diet, there is no best workout, there is no perfect partner, there is no best job. It's like you shape your reality for how it needs to be.
That is so true. It's really what is best for you. And I think having grown up, and I think in the US, there's so much the best. Like we always say, the best. This is
Best
the best
fast.
coffee.
Yeah.
This is the best workout you could do. And it's like, oh my gosh, everything is the best.
Yeah.
And it's funny that we do that. And someone pointed that out to me while traveling that we always say the greatest or whatever. And it never is, because it's like whatever you determine is the best for you is the best. And everybody has such a different look on reality.
Totally. Perspective is a fantastic thing. You know, one of the phrases I like am so intentional not to say or word is obviously. Because, you know,
Okay.
like I might look at that glass and be like, wow, that is a fascinating piece of art. You may look at it and be like, that ain't no fancy china, you know? So, but it's the same thing. However, we
Right.
come from different realities to interpret something. So, going back to what you were saying, the
Agreed.
best, the whatever, well, yeah, it's the best for you because you might have had a great experience with it. But for me, I might look at something and be like, wow, that is so not anything that I would want to be associated with. So I agree. I think best is a overused term, and I think self-awareness and just being able to adapt into what you or what serves you best is the best for you.
Completely agree. So, what do you think, with all your experience, is something that has helped you the most in creating the brand that you're creating now?
Yeah, two things come to mind. One is like I am the embodiment of the values for which I hope that my brand conveys:
Mm-hmm.
discipline, hard work, the belief, and no no accomplishment is too big. It's that you can do anything you put your mind to, and many times it's not sexy. It's showing up every day. It's having the inspiration and the mindset of wanting to be great, which is the message that I really try to convey to everyone.
Right.
And being the example of that through my own experience makes it easy, because not only does it keep me accountable, because it's a core value of mine to um, really embody excellence in whatever it is that I do, but also I have little bouts of encouragement throughout the journey of inspiration. And so it's a commitment to myself. It's the message I want to convey. And, you know, it's fun. Like, I wouldn't do or change anything about my life for anything at this stage, because I'm just doing what I feel is serving the phase of life I'm in, and it's a beautiful way to live. And you know, I encourage anyone who may be not so happy in their career or whatever it is to like take a step back and
Right.
realize like
There are other things you could do.
exactly. And a lot of the things that we do have a certain influence of social and societal programming. So
Agreed.
taking yourself out of that mind, and look, it's not the luxury that we all have.
Right.
However, I think it's worth exploring how there are ways of your own life, whether it's a big jump in a different career or small wins in just daily habits, to just be the best version of yourself for whatever that means for you.
Yeah, that is really important. I think it's so easy to say, oh, well, everybody else is having a family. Maybe I should have a family. It's like when people get to a certain age, oh, I should be doing this by this time because that's what everybody else is doing. But it's like, is that really what you want?
Yeah.
Is that the path that like is for you? And I see so many people like in this driver's seat, and they have no idea really where they want to go, constantly trying to match just anyone around them.
hmm This is a bit of a cliche, but I really, really do want to share this with you. You know, I think Matthew McConaughey won some award, and his speech
Okay.
was all around like his heroes.
Oh, okay.
And for me, I have interpreted it slightly differently. Perhaps it's consistent, but the comparison that you should always have, in my perspective, is that you just want to be better than who you were yesterday. And that should be enough. As dramatic as a multi-million billion dollar exit, or as, you know, routine as I did 5 more minutes of exercise. And if you can constantly seek improvement through that lens, I believe the dividends are much higher. And, you know, I think there is a bit of this like demonization of social media where now the world is your like comparison ground.
Right.
But I do think like there are ways to leverage that as motivation to say like, you know, there are like the world is vast, and maybe drawing inspiration to say like anything is achievable versus interpreting that as like, oh well, that's just a genetic favorability for this individual. So
Right.
I think to just compartmentalize and say, look, you know, being the best version of yourself means being better than yesterday. And I know that sounds a little cliche, but that to me is like how I keep myself going, of saying like, was I better than what I did the day before? And that's what has enabled me to like just stay consistent, um, and just appreciate the world for what it is.
Agreed. I think a lot of people say comparison is a thief of joy, but a lot of the time I feel like comparison is more of the thief of time, because not only do I sit and maybe compare to what I'm seeing, I also then feel less motivated. Or
Mm,
I get that in that comparison loop and I'm like thinking more negatively. So then that reduces my motivation over even maybe a longer period of time. So it's like that thing when you're racing someone and you look to the side, and everyone always talks about how that makes you go slower. But I think that
yeah,
that genuinely does make you go a lot slower in life, constantly looking around to what everybody else is doing.
totally. Yeah. It goes back to like, do what serves you. And if comparison is the thief of joy for you, create the systems to not let it infiltrate your day to day. But what I've really found that serves me personally is
Mm-hmm.
like, if I can just be 1% better than yesterday, the day before, like there, I think is like a healthy way for me to seek improvement. Because I think one of the things you're talking about is like at a certain stage of life, when you stop growing, I feel like there becomes a bit of like you lose yourself a little bit, and like if you're not advancing in life,
Right.
there needs to be something, no matter how big or small, goals to keep you going. And I think if you can leverage who you were yesterday, whether it's how kind you were, you know, how hard you worked, or whatever it might be,
Mm-hmm.
just seeking the concept of being better, be great, whatever it is, I think has served me to date. And maybe I'll change that when I get a little older. But for now, you know, I've been able to really use that as my North Star.
Yeah. What are some of the goals you have coming up for this year or with your brand?
Hmm. Maybe I'll take a business approach at this because
Okay.
I've been a bit more philosophical here.
I love
Yeah.
it.
You know, social media, I think, has one of the most valuable attributes, which is attention.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that a lot of creators create products to capitalize on the attention. And
Right.
I've done the same. Now, what I have learned being in this game for some time now is that your customers are your greatest marketers. And so I've been solely focused on developing the most excellent product for which you come back and you tell a friend. I think when it comes to brand longevity, those are the cornerstones of success. Yes, you may be able to convert customers, but that is a like losing value proposition over the long term. So what I have learned through combining my brand experience as well as my own entrepreneurial journey is that if you don't receive something and you feel a certain type of way and you come back seeking for more and then you tell a friend because it's so good,
Right.
that is where I think I would have the confidence to go all in from an inventory perspective or whatever. I wouldn't now go into a product oriented business and try to capitalize on attention, because that is a very fleeting or limited and losing proposition in the long term. So I've delayed certain product launches for many seasons now because it isn't right. And it's hard because there's no playbook. There is no, this is how you launch products and this is what
Right.
good product looks like. But at the end of the day, use yourself as a consumer. And that's really where I've focused on is that, yeah, I want to sell women's wear. I want to sell footwear. I want to do all these things. But my competency right now is that I know what good feels like in the gym from an apparel standpoint. So I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to win there and then focus otherwise, because we're so infiltrated with new ideas and, you know, why don't we do this has higher margin, whatever. But at the end of the day, like, stick to what is the core, and then build around that versus get distracted, go into a business that you don't understand, and be exposed to risks that otherwise wouldn't be in your advantage, especially in the early stages.
Yeah, that is really important. What do you think makes your brand unique compared to the other ones?
Oh, I love podcasts and I
Mm-hmm.
draw a lot of inspiration. I think men's apparel is in the athletic space premium has been a generally underserved category. I think it's pretty well known that women's apparel in general is more lucrative. I mean, everything from when you walk into a department store, the first thing you see, women's. You have
Right.
to go upstairs. Like there is just a lenient or a convenience to categories that have higher return. And so I've carved out a niche where I think that not a lot of attention is there, but there is a growing demand to converge fitness and fashion. And, you know, that's really where I put a very dedicated effort. And this is some of the philosophies I've used on the brand
Okay.
is that like I wouldn't start a leggings business because I know there are some dominant players that have really captured authority there. But when I think like premium sportswear for men, I don't intuitively come to mind with like, okay, these are the major players that, wow, if I have to go, head to head, this will be a losing proposition. Now, don't get me wrong, fashion is a very competitive business, but I think it's to understand macro trends, it's to understand personal strengths, and then apply the effort within. Because, for example, if you go into a declining industry, I don't know, like dinosaur costumes, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's a small market, it's not growing, but we have this growing attention towards wellness. So, check. You have less competition in terms of premium sportswear for men,
Right.
check. And then I consider myself to be the target consumer, check. So then when I have all three of those things met, to me, it's an execution game.
Yeah, that I'm trying to think of like the menswear because I wouldn't even really know that. But besides that point, I feel like that's amazing that you're able to kind of see that trend and pinpoint reasons. I feel like a lot of the times people are just like, I am the target audience for it, and that's what's good enough because they're like, I need it, other people will need it. But you're like, I need it, and I see that there's a spot in the market and it's more niche for it. So that's really cool that you're able to kind of execute on that pretty fast.
Yeah.
So then with your brand, what do you see in the next like few years for it?
Yeah, what I've realized in studying successful brands, I think there's this common perception that these are all overnight successes. But from what I've really uncovered is like these are 7 to 10 year journeys. And
Right.
knowing that it's getting all the fundamentals right, crafting and developing a product when I feel it, I just know that it's a hero product. And so sticking to the fundamentals, focusing on building a community that to me transcends even quality of product. I think when you have a group of individuals that believe in something bigger than a logo and thus gives logo meanings, I think is what I'm focused on. So it's creating all the content around why there's meaning behind what I do, and then giving consumers or audience members some product or service that enables advocacy beyond that. So to me, it's not about making a certain dollar amount or achieving certain milestones at this stage. At least it's about being authentic to who I am, embodying those principles, being able to showcase that to the world, and then having some vehicle, whether it's product or services around being your best you, to represent that story and have other people share that journey. So, yeah, I'm very much focused on product excellence and sharing my message and being as authentic as I can. Because I think one of the things that I'm sure you can relate to is that there's such a pressure on engagement and doing the things that garners
Right.
likes and whatnot, best this, best
Yeah.
that. But at the end of the day, to create a platform where you can uniquely have a microphone that is not as influenced by algorithms, through consistency, through things that matter to you, is
I
where I'm
like that a
focused on.
lot. I think that's so important because one, that makes your why stronger. You know, when you're chasing algorithm, you're chasing, attention, that is always, I think, kind of what leads to long-term burnout, in the
Hmm.
sense that you lose passion, you lose love for it, because you become, that becomes your master. That becomes the thing that you have to constantly be like, what do they want? What do they need? But instead, focusing on just like that community that you're building. What do you think is like the slogan for your brand right now?
Be great.
Be great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and define that for yourself. That's
Yeah.
why I wanted to keep it very simple.
Mm-hmm.
Great might mean, and in some cases for me, it's like not eating past 9 p.m.
Right.
That to me, I was great that day. And for someone else, it might be to win a gold medal. And the individualism of defining success for yourself and achieving greatness in whatever it is, but also understanding that it doesn't come overnight, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a commitment to oneself. It's a identity, definition of who you are, and living by the principles that serve that purpose. And so, I've been much more intentional about sharing a bit more consistently around just showing up on a daily basis, because that's like 90% of the battle. If you can show up, you take the mental fatigue out of it, and then you just execute. So I think ideas are now so abundant. And even when we think about institution as someone who is very intimately close to college and the education system, it's now more about the curation and the execution sans the information itself. Because we're in an information economy. We
Right.
now have to be able to really focus on the information that serves us best and apply those skills. And one of the things that I like commonly ask or use as a reference is like, I don't think it's rocket science on like how to get six pack abs. Like it's pretty simple when you think about like you eat healthy and you move. But how many people are willing to do that? I mean, it's
Right.
not rocket science, right? And
Right.
of course, I'm generalizing tremendously here,
Right.
but you move more than you are sedentary, and you eat generally healthy, and you don't stuff yourself to a point where you're bloated most of the time. And over time, you will start to see results. But we all know this. But how many? There's a quote, I think it's so funny. One of my friends loves to say this. There are more millionaires than there are people with six packs. So I think it goes back to just like be great and show up, and that's half the battle. And if I can be a conduit of that through my own day to day, then I'm content.
Okay. And then going back to product excellence, what is that for you?
Ooh, that's a good one. Something that I constantly battle with is coming from a consultant mind. Data objectivity is like such a cornerstone of like how you operate.
Yeah.
But I think there's an art that you can't really explain. As I think about attribution error in now I'm really switching to like business acumen here,
That's right.
but like some brands will host major events and then have to somehow justify the ROI. So what I'm trying to get with this example is that it's a feeling.
Okay.
I know what good is because I'm in this industry, and that's why going back to some of the considerations of what I'm going into, I think being a consumer of the industry, the product is so important because, as much as one can read about the best shirt because we love best, it's another thing to like touch it and evoke an emotion that you kind of just
And
know
feel it.
and feel it. And so I'm no product expert, but I went to Hong Kong a month ago, and I sat down with people who don't even speak English, and I was like measuring stuff and
Mm-hmm.
doing all and feeling fabrics and being touching them, and I just know. And so
Right.
yeah, sometimes you could have the most perfect playbook that says your material has to be 95% polyester,
Right.
5% spandex, and recycled, yada 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 yada. But then you wear it and it's like, wow, this fits too loose or tight, and I don't like this or that and
Right.
whatever. So I think just being a consumer can put you in a very advantage point. And so anyone looking to start their own business, I think there is a bit of a competitive advantage where you're not just chasing the AI revolution or content for the sake of content, but doing something that you understand and intrinsically enjoy and want to iterate on so that you feel proud about the product that you put up.
Agreed. I think also when you start from that place of why, like that true place of what you want, the kind of community you want to build, the kind of product you want, and like having that so strong of what you truly like, then after you can go and look, oh, does this trend fit? Or does this type of thing that's doing really well, that's really popular, also align with my brand? Because I think your brain will automatically start coming up with ideas of how it can grow after you already have a foundation that's really strong. But I think
100%.
people start too early and they're like, no, I just want to grow now. And it's like, wait, like that will come. When your strong foundation is set, that will come. But you cannot implement that too early.
100%. And I want to just echo that because this game is hard. Content is hard. Attention is so scarce. Competition is at an all-time high. And so just being confident that these are the things that you would do independent of the financial upside, the accolades of being famous
Right.
or whatever. And as much as you can align your time and energy to the things that you would do otherwise, I would really encourage you to just like be confident in the path forward, because that's really where the lack of reinforcement bias and the emphasis on likes and views can be a bit daunting. But
Yeah.
if it's something you truly enjoy and you stay the course, I'm so confident that luck is a function of being in the game and you can't lose if
Long
you don't
enough.
quit.
Right.
So yeah, luck is not, I don't see it as, a, a probability game in the most, traditional way. It's like you've been in the game so long that eventually you could be so bad at shooting free throws, but if you shoot a million free throws, one of those balls are going in the net. And then you call that luck.
Right.
But it's just a function of getting the reps
Constantly
in.
showing up.
Yeah.
I completely agree. I also think, there are obviously factors like that come into play that might be based on timing, but you would never
Mm,
have that timing without the constantly
exactly.
showing up.
Yeah. And that I would say, like, even being a little bit anticipatory and saying, like, I feel that certain people are starting to ask a lot of questions around certain topics, or even using data
Right.
of like Google search terms and whatever, and to spin that a little bit and try to anticipate trends to be able to work in your favor. So like health and wellness, there's a reason why there's a bajillion gyms in development here and why every gym has a recovery center, because there's an acknowledgement that we all care about our overall well-being and longevity.
Right.
So I think just being very conscientious of like using whatever signals you can and applying that to like what is authentic to you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I completely agree. And then going back to, you manufacture your clothes in Hong Kong?
China.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you worked with someone who is in Hong Kong and
Yeah.
manufactures in
Yeah.
China.
I can give some really, really practical brand advice for anyone starting a clothing brand.
Uh-huh.
You want to meet your suppliers face to face, and that gives you a lot more leverage in terms of pricing and favorability with regards to like timing as well. So my strategy was, okay, quickly, I got scammed multiple times because when you're finding manufacturers online, the market is just so good at creating false social accounts and this, that, yada, yada.
Right.
And I was getting no responses because these major any reputable manufacturer typically doesn't give attention to someone who wants a small MOQ. And so I researched major expos that all these manufacturers now come and aggregate in one place. So I went there myself for 3 days and just met with every booth humanly possible
Okay.
and played to the masses and found the ones that I really felt more of a human connection. It wasn't the accolades of their like capacity. It was more like this person's really responsive, they're extremely willing to work and invest the time and resources to co-develop. And so I shortlisted against those. And one interesting thing that I do want to share, as I've learned in being the manufacturer or like the brand, is that I don't know why China has this perception of cheap quality, because I understand that like in like consumer electronics, there's a lot of fakes out there, but China's been in the game the longest. They have the most sophisticated technology when it comes to, like yarns and knits and whatever. So they are the most advanced in the game. And sure, you might not have that be indicative of every manufacturer, but the biggest players, there's a reason why they're in Asia, China, Vietnam specifically.
Yeah.
Portugal has some of the cotton, some of the best cotton material, but by and large, like everyone's in China and Vietnam. And it's not purely from a cost perspective, because they have such advanced technologies out there because they've just been in the game so long.
So why China and not Vietnam then?
So Vietnam caters to much larger brands. I mean, you're looking at
Okay.
MOQs of like, in some cases I've quoted like millions before they're willing to work with you. So I think it's a stepping stone approach where at first I kind of took, email everyone at all costs, then the China approach, and then from there we'll see. I have actually partnered with some manufacturers here in Bali, because the other thing I wanted to do was create an ecosystem of work and play. So anytime I do come to Bali, there's a business reason as well. So I have a few
Okay.
factories here, bit smaller, mom and pop, less margin, but it's fine because I don't go to China for fun. I come here for fun. So if I can create business here,
That's
then
so smart.
yeah,
I really like that. That's a really smart move because you want to be able to also have those places where it is fun, incentives
yeah,
for discipline.
yeah. And Google Translate's my best friend here, but
Yeah.
I think it's very important for me to not be so work and play separate,
Separate,
right?
okay.
Like, create reasons where, I mean, even hanging out with friends, you know, within reason, there's content opportunity around
Agreed.
this in manufacturing,
Yeah.
in when I work out, I just set up a tripod and record it. So,
Yeah.
of course, there's a balance to this of like, you don't want to just have a camera in front of your face all the time, but wherever you can create efficiencies, because there's only so many hours in the day, like power to you, especially in the early stages where you have to be scrappy and you got to figure out the ways to maximize the 24 hours in the day.
Agreed. I think a lot of people get scared about doing work and play because they feel that maybe the boundary will get so gray that they'll feel like they're always working or feel like they don't know where to stop. But I think once you start getting into it and you start learning your own balance, work and play, I found is the best way to also like going back to incentivizing yourself to want to do more and
100%.
creating motivation because if your friend is like, hey, like let's go and do this content thing, chances are it wouldn't be as fun to do it alone.
100%.
So
Yeah, you win together.
you
That's
do.
another value that I now hold deeply, is that the game, the solo game has a ceiling, and there are things that give you high energy, there are things that drain your energy, and if you can partner up with competencies of which aren't intrinsic energy drivers for you, I mean, that's really where a lot of magic happens. 1 + 1 = 3, whether it's business, relationships,
Right.
whatever it might be, like self-awareness. It comes back to that of saying, like, how can I really be in my zone of genius as much as I can? And of course, that's not always like 100%. There are things that we have to do that we don't enjoy. Like editing is not necessarily the most energy inducing activity, but until there comes a time where you can outsource that or partner with someone who intrinsically loves doing that, I think there's a lot of value in being able to do it to begin with, appreciate the process, and then figure out partners to really help you grow exponentially, because there are other people that perhaps get energy from it and would double the output solely from the perspective
Yes.
of their love for what they're doing.
Yeah. I always think about that because when I started, I was like, I want to be independent and not have to rely on anyone and kind of do my own thing and I can make this work. But I feel like this year I've learned that I don't want to be like that. I think it is so much more powerful to have people, like you're saying, that are with you, because you do have a ceiling, you have a limit, and having a team is way more powerful. But I also think you are always going to be, in a way, dependent on other people, regardless of whatever you do. So you might as well learn to kind of manage that in a way that you love, because you're going to either have customers that you rely on, you're going to have a boss that you rely on, you're going to have a client or whatever it is. It's always going to be something, so just choose the way you want it to be, if you can.
I love that. I fully agree with you. I have nothing else to add. And yeah, life is a team sport.
It
and
is.
you know, I was very similar to you, where it's like I can do everything, and maybe you can, but there's definitely a shorter ceiling than if you can do it with people that can really help complement whatever it is that you're doing. And yeah, it's just more fun that way. So
Agreed.
yeah.
And then how can people find you and your brand?
Yeah, well, on Instagram, it's really fitness focused, so it's at 11VN Fit, and I've recently started YouTube to showcase a little bit more of lifestyle.
Okay.
So I think just having multiple identities on different platforms is one thing I would encourage people to explore, because I mean TikTok is being banned in the US Jan 19th, so I think just
Oh, it's official.
from what I've heard, yeah. So yeah, just protect yourself in knowing that however you can share your message through multiple mediums, like do it. So that's why I'm doing both.
Yeah.
And luckily my TikTok isn't my livelihood, so you know, a lot of empathy for people that now have to kind of reinvent their content strategy.
Right.
But
Oh my gosh, that would be incredibly hard.
yeah, like Vine went away, right? I think there were some
Yeah.
notable creators there. So as we do in life, we just adapt and we
Right.
grow, and life will go on. Be great.
Be great. That is the message for today. I love that. And I'll put all of your stuff in the notes as well.
Amazing. That was fun.
That was really fun. You're so good at this.